apologies for messing up your day and also for having to leave so early. I wanted to stay at least for a day, but there is a little boy who needs to have some surgery in Geneva, and so I have to go back as soon as I can. Apologies also because when Anne-Sophie contacted me, I may have been kind and prompt in my answer, but I also said, look, I can't really speak about poetry because I've never done digital work on poetry. I will speak about art instead, not that that's exactly my subject, but it was a work in progress. It has at least this in common with what you would be doing, that poetry and even more so art have been relatively neglected in the development of digital humanities. Novels have played the lion's share by far. And so, you know, in both cases, it's an attempt to, poetry has been studied more, art almost not at all. And yeah, the idea here is to enter the field of art, computational art criticism by addressing what in my opinion at least, is the most ambitious attempt of 20th century art history, which is Aby Warburg's Atlas Mnemosyne. This, the name occurs for the first time in 26, when he jots down the idea of a Bilder Atlas in his journal, occupies him for 3 years. In 29, he suddenly dies, and that's the end of Mnemosyne. Leo Impet is a grad student at EPFL. I have to direct his master's thesis. We agreed to work together on this. It was really a working together, even though all the programming and almost all of the statistical thinking is his own. But as you will see, there is a continuous back and forth between the two. So what was Mnemosyne? Mnemosyne consisted in a series of panels, big black panels, canvas panels, 170 by 140, on which were attached all sorts of images. This is one of them. It's a little more crowded than most of them are, and since it's black and white reproductions of paintings, statues, bas-reliefs, newspaper articles, book pages, coins, stamps, all sorts of posters, advertising, etc., etc. Was indeed, for its time, was extremely bold in mixing high and low, and also in mixing the past and the present, as we'll see in a moment. Warburg, in those 3 years, kept changing the number of the images, their disposition, the number of the panels. There are 3 recorded versions of the atlas. One from 28 with 40-odd panels and about 700 images. One from early 29 with about 1,000 images. One he was working with at the time of his death with 63 panels and just under 1,000 images. That's the one we use, most people use. But clearly this is a very unstable object of study. One of his last journal entries speaks of Mnemosyne as a project in 200 panels. So perhaps he really thought it should be 3 times as large as what. The panels have been dismantled, but all the photographs are at the Warburg Institute. And the exhibition has actually been put together a couple of times, one in Siena, once in Karlsruhe. And it's incredible. If you go and see, you really, it's shocking to have these 50, 60 panels move from one to the other with all these images. What was he trying to do with Mnemosyne? For him, these 1,000 images were all interconnected, and the point of the project was to provide a sort of gigantic montage to prove morphological permanence across historical time, whence Mnemosyne, memory. This is what the atlas is really trying to do. It's trying to be the meeting point between form and history. Form and history in art criticism, just as in literary criticism, are usually opposite concepts. He wanted to join them together. And the montage supposedly was to make the permanence of ancient forms visible. The problem is, how exactly are we supposed to look at images like this? Left to right, top to bottom, center to periphery. What is the center of this image? I'm going to tell you, the center of this image is this figure here. But could one ever have guessed it? Impossible. The panels, as I said, kept being rearranged, and this is not even one of the most perplexing ones. This is a relatively ordered instance. There are no captions. There is an introduction to the atlas, which is 5 pages in length. There are a few other texts, all extremely compressed, all extremely cryptic. So it's a very elusive body of work. It's often compared to another great, gigantic attempt and possibly failure of 20th century cultural criticism, Benjamin's Passagenwerk. But actually, Passagenwerk is much more explicit and much better organized compared to Neumann. But there is, in this maze, there is a thread which is Warburg's great conceptual creation, which is the concept of the pathosformel. Pathosformel, formula for pathos, formula for the expression of pathos, pathos itself, passion, emotion, suffering. It is a term with many, perhaps too many meanings. All of them unified by, in Warburg's word, a superlative. For him, the pathosformel had to express pathos in a superlative, in an extreme antique formulas of intensified physical or psychic expression. As he put in an essay, he introduced the concept in 1905. Mnemosyne came 25 years later, but the concept was introduced in an essay on Dürer in 1905. A state of excitement or inner emotion. An image of pathosformel is an image of the body that conveys a perturbation of the soul. It's an inner state made visible through the body. This is a very powerful concept. First of all, because it joins two semi-concepts that are semantically opposite. Pathos and form. Pathos, something sudden, external, overpowering. Formal, a stable patterning which allows this sudden moment of pathos to survive into, this is another of Warburg's key concepts, into a Nachleben, persistence, afterlife, survival. Mnemosyne has two historical centers, classical antiquity and the early Renaissance. The whole point is that these formal of pathos that had emerged in antiquity resurfaced in the Renaissance. Permanence of form through historical time. Formulas of the dynamic pathos all'antica, he writes in the introduction, achieved an overwhelming hegemony among other conventions. And pathosformel returns in there are a lot of annotations to the panels. They're not explicitly attached, but in journals, in entry notes. And pathos is very often used by Warburg as well when he refers to many of these panels. So now a lot of very good critical work has been done on the pathosformel. I'll return to that in 1 minute. No one, as far as we know, has tried to do what Leo and I tried to do. That is to say, operationalizing the concept. Operationalizing is a barbaric neologism, not so neo. I mean, it was coined in the 1920s by American physicists. And it basically means transforming a concept into a series of quantitative operations so that you can actually turn the concept into a tool to measure reality. Clearly, the pathosformel had not been coined by Warburg with operationalization in mind. This is obvious. This makes the work harder. At the same time, it makes it more necessary, because if you think about it, just about every important concept of literary criticism, of aesthetics, of art criticism, of cultural history, has been created without having operationalizing in mind. And so you want to do quantitative cultural history, literary history, you have this choice. You either ignore all existing theoretical concepts, which would be barbaric, or else you have to find a way to turn them into instruments of measurement. You have to find a way to operationalize them. The first thing, operationalizing a concept, slightly misleading because you don't operationalize everything at once. A concept is a complex structure. The first work you have to do is to look into the concept, to analyze the concept and see what are the components of the concept itself that can be operationalized. What are the aspects of the concept that can be quantified, because that's the whole point of operationalization. But at the same time, they have to be open to quantification, but they also have to be essential to the internal architecture of the concept. You want to operationalize the core of the concept. You don't want to measure some, marginal aspect simply because it's easy to measure. Okay, and so before you start counting anything, you have to do a lot of conceptual analytical work. And when you begin doing that, you realize, it seems to us that this is a very unbalanced concept. Not only because pathos and formal are semantically opposite, but because pathos is much, much more important than formal. Whenever he comes close to the idea of pathos, he becomes incredibly creative linguistically. In the introduction to Mnemosyne, which, as I said, is a very short text, we have orgiastic fervor, phobic impressions, highest inner emotion, passionate experience, pagan exaltation, boundless unleashing, interior abandon, murderous drunkenness, paroxystic fervor, and so on and so on and so on. So, whenever he comes close to pathos, he immediately looks for a synonym, which is not just a synonym, but it's a development of the concept. It's a very rich, it's a very fertile concept. Formal, not at all. So, first decision, we took Pathosformel and decided that we would operationalize pathos, because that seemed to be conceptually, for Warburg, the center of the motion. A minute of secondary literature. In Pathosformel, the outward movements of the whole body convey inner emotion. This is David Friedberg, art historian who used to be the director of the Warburg Institute up to a few months ago. Swaying bodies, vigorously flowing drapery, hair flying in the breeze, conveyed inner states of psychic excitation. The concept gave art history access to the fundamental anthropological dimension of the symptom understood as movement in bodies. This is Georges Normand. Philippe Alain Michaud. He was not a motionless, well-balanced body that, as in Winkelmann, of course, that was the model for the imitation of antiquity, but the body caught in a play of overwhelming forces. A hysterical body, concludes Sigrid Schade, in an essay in which one of Charcot's patients, Warburg almost certainly knew of Charcot's work on hysterics. One of Charcot's patients is described as performing an alphabet of passionate gestures with her body. So, movements of the whole body, swaying bodies, hysterical body, body caught in a play of overwhelming forces, and the face, completely absent. Which is strange, and even stranger, considering the book that Warburg encountered at the very beginning of his trajectory towards the Pathosformel, a book, ein Buch, das mir hilft, a book that helps me, he jots in his journal. The book was Darwin's Expressions of Emotions in Men and Animals. Warburg will work on how images express inner emotion. Darwin's book has 34 images of human emotion. 32 out of 34, the text focuses on the face. At times you have the whole body, but the text, with children, you have the whole body, but the text only really works on the face. The muscles around the eyes are discussed immediately in the first page of the book. Then follow eyebrows, corners of the mouth, facial muscles, frowning, blushing, I shall often have to refer to the muscles of the human face, Darwin explains. The first 3 images of the book are indeed anatomical drawings of the muscles of the face. And even recently, Carlo Ginzburg, in reaffirming the importance of Darwin for Warburg, focused on a page by Darwin, which is about tears, laughter, the swift movement from the one to the other. Whenever people write about Darwin, they associate, whether they say it or not, that emotion with the face. A book that helps me, and then Warburg does exactly the opposite of what Darwin had done. This is interesting, and it's not for lack of interest in the face. There is an essay, The Art of Portraiture and Florentine Bourgeoisie, in which there is a page that focuses on those 6 faces down there that emerged from the underworld, as he puts it, is Poliziano, Pucci, Franco, and the 3 Medici children. And so he was interested in the face. He could be very interested in the face, but not in connection with the pathos. His observations on flowing hair in Botticelli, I've already mentioned what Friedberg says. For Warburg, flowing hair was itself a sign of inner emotion. Now, think about this. Hair is a way of, if you associate emotions with hair, it means that you bring emotions as close as possible to the face. You literally attach it to the face without involving the face. There is something almost phobic about this, and of course, phobias played a very important and painful role in Warburg's life, but that's not the direction that interests me here. Rather, I actually think that Warburg was right in disregarding the face. He may have thought that Darwin's book helped him, but actually, at bottom, he was pursuing a completely different path, because the discontinuity between Darwin's analysis and Warburg has to do with the discontinuity between the concepts of pathos and emotion. Pathos and emotion, extremely large issue. It would deserve a day or maybe more than a day of discussion on its own. Very bluntly put, because I have to say something, I would say that pathos is simply too strong to be expressed by necessarily small and subtle movements of the face. Pathos is something that grabs the whole body, that takes control of the whole body. One is overwhelmed by pathos, paralyzed by fear, inflamed by anger, flooded, crushed, taken over. All passives, incidentally. Passive, pathos, passion have all the same root. Whereas we usually feel an emotion, behaving at least grammatically as subjects. We have an emotion. Pathos has us. And the face is part of that. When you can express an inner state by movements of the muscles of the face, that means you already have a mastery over that emotion. Mastery and pathos are antithetical. There is no way of mastering pathos. So, following what seems to us to be the implicit logic of Warburg concept and of all the secondary literature on it, we decided to exclude the face from our measurement. We may be completely wrong, of course, but the decision highlights a very important aspect of the process of operationalization, which is this. You have to be absolutely clear about your interpretation of the concept. You either include the face or you don't. Clarity is not a matter of style. It's not an option. It's a logical constraint. And I think the introduction of more logical constraints is an important aspect of what the computational approach to the humanities is. So, no face. Movements of the whole body, as Friedberg and all the others say. Well, the whole body, but arms and legs. These are the running and dancing nymphs and mammals of Warburg's Florentine essays, and even more than legs, arms. As in the Venetian woodcut, as I said, Warburg introduced the Pathosformel in an essay on Dürer. This appears in the essay on Dürer, is presented by Warburg as a most telling image if the death of Orpheus. And as you can see, there are 4 Menace with raised arms ready to strike, and Orpheus himself is raising one of his hands in a vain attempt of defense or protection or whatever. And reflecting on the Pathosformel, Friedberg, for instance, mentions the desperate mother with outstretched hands, which returns in Goya. In Goya's Disastrous, he speaks of the desire to bring down the hatchet in a certain painting, and there are many other passages like this. Perhaps the strongest collective focus on the role of arms in Pathosformel comes from a recent Italian collection in which Salvatore Settis focuses on the falling arm at a right angle from the body in the figure of Christ. And Carlo Ginzburg focuses on the opposite movement of raised hands of the Maenad, including the Maenad under the cross of this. This appears in one of Warburg's panels. But the most striking image of all is in an essay by Maria Luisa Catoni, and it's this woman running forwards with her arms stretched backwards. And I'll return to this image. She calls it Desperate Woman in Motion at the end of the talk, at the conclusion of the talk. Right now, having done, at least quickly, this bit of conceptual analysis, entering the quantitative part of the work, an important difference between quantitative art history and quantitative literary history. In literature, in music, there is a notational system with discrete units that allow you to do a lot of things rather quickly, not only finding individual units, words, etc., but even grammar, syntax can be parsed and programmed. There is no equivalent to that in art. So the first decision has to do, you have to create your own alphabet. Orpheus' death is the introduction of the Pathosformel. All of these appear in Warburg's essay. It's clear that there is a similarity, but how can that similarity be measured? This is the technical, but also obviously conceptual conundrum in front of us. So our answer came in 3 steps. First, if pathos resides in the body, we would single out the body and, so to speak, fish it out of the painting. Simply put, we drew a box around all bodies that appeared more or less in their entirety and focused on the other. Second decision, more radical, we eliminated clothes and color, and faces and hands, etc., and reduced these bodies to skeletons. 12 segments. Upper and lower arm, upper and lower legs, so 4, 4, 8. The 2 shoulders, the neck, and the spine. 12 segments. In the Pittura, Alberti speaks of painting as you first have to put the bones and then you have to construct the muscles and the body around them. We even learned when we were done with the work really that painters and sculptors have long used mannequins whose basic principle is really the same as that of our skeletons. But this is not the reason we opted to draw these skeletons, not because we wanted to follow the process the actual process of production of painting. Occasionally they may do that, but that was not the reason. We wanted to have these skeletons in order to have a notational system made of simple units. And the 12 stick figures were exactly that, a little alphabet for Pathosformel. We knew we were losing a lot. I mean, paintings, you eliminate color and faces and clothes. Of course you lose a lot. But the alphabet mattered most. Third and most radical decision, we decided to focus on one variable. We measure only one variable. That is to say, the angles that the limbs form among themselves and with the spine. And the angles are then combined into what we call skeletal vectors. If pathos is conveyed by outward movements, outstretched arms, etc., then the angles formed by arms and legs would be a measure. Not the measure with complex concepts, there is always alternatives, but a measure for sure. Limbs extended into space violate the upright carriage indicative of poise and control. This is a recent essay on Cinquecento painting. Angles track that violation. Wider angle, greater violation, greater pathos. It's not so simple, of course, but this is the basis of the whole thing. And then angles allowed us to ignore everything else about the body. It doesn't matter. This body has, for instance, the legs are much longer than the arms, as it often happens with human beings. And we completely ignore that. It doesn't matter if you have broad shoulders or small, you're tall or short. It doesn't matter. All that matters is the dynamic of the body. Angles basically eliminated any feature except the dynamism of the body. It was a way of capturing that life in motion that Warburg always associated with the Pathosformel. Angles track motion. Again, we may be wrong in wagering everything on the angles, but it is a conceptual wager. It's not that angles are easier to measure than other things. It's that we thought that this came closer to the core of the concept. So 11 angles was all that the algorithm had done. Allow me one final conceptual parenthesis. What is a form? We have entered the realm of form. We began by dissecting pathos, then face, arms, legs, etc., etc. Okay, now with measurement we enter the realm of formula. Concrete images are transformed into iconographic schemes made of discrete minimal units that are repeatable and combinable. This is a quote from Catoni's essay. Catoni doesn't go in the direction of computation at all. She's just trying to talk about formal elements here. Our segments and angles are exactly that. They're discrete, minimal, combinable, repeatable units. Are they a formel or are they a form? This sounds a little Byzantine, but form, after all, is perhaps the single most important concept of literary theory and of art theory. So, and the two concepts, form and formula, are not identical. The difference seems to me to be this, that form, to quote the introduction to Mnemosyne again, form has primarily what Warburg calls an anti-chaotic function. Anti-chaotic is his expression. So faced with the whirlwind of passions and movements, form operates a selection of the materials to be represented and organizes them in a hierarchy. There is an interestingly agonistic quality to all this, anti-chaotic, a struggle between forming power and a material to be overcome. This is Panofsky, who worked at the Warburg Institute, of course, in his essay on the Kunstform. This sense of a struggle is absent from the notion of form, which is, for its part, characterized by two main features. One is a further reduction of the elements. Formula, literally, is a diminutive of form. It's a smaller form. But it's not just a smaller form. Formula is a form that has learned to replicate itself. Formula is a form that has learned to last in time and that therefore has achieved that Nachleben that for Warburg was so crucial to art history. In a sense, in the relationship between these two concepts, form and formula, you can see the two axes of Mnemosyne converge. Form, with its anti-chaotic function, is the key notion of aesthetic morphology. Formula, the key notion of aesthetic history. And Warburg was probably right in taking the road of formula in his. What exactly is a formula? What has happened? This is André Jolles, Dutch literary theorist, went to Florence with Warburg in 1900, and they exchanged letters. Cherchez la femme, my dear. A young lady is playing with me a cruel game. Am I running after her or she after me? I no longer know. Now she's Salome, dancing with her lethal charm. Now Judith, proud in her triumph, carrying with bouncing steps the head of the murdered general. Now she seems to have in the budding grace of little Tobias, striding bravely and happily. At times, I see her in a seraphim, in Gabriel, bringing the happy message, in a maid at the wedding, or in a mother, terrified, fleeing from the slaughter of the innocents. I'll try to see her again, as I first saw in Santa Maria Novella, but in the meantime, she's multiplied herself. She's multiplied herself. This is what a formula is like. Always the same fundamental type, but in all sorts of different incarnations. One of which was for Jolles and Warburg particularly important. It's that figure that I have briefly shown in that was the opening panel, and it's a figure in the Birth of John the Baptist by Ghirlandaio. Nympha, the nymph, Jolles and Warburg called her, and with a name that immediately evoked the Nachleben der Antike. And the Nymphenair panel were for us the test case to see whether skeleton vectors worked. We took all the images, all the full bodies visible in the panel, we extracted them, we turned them into skeleton vectors, then we focused on the first principal component. The first principal component is the set of data with the maximum variance, and this is a schematic representation that forearm, these three where the red arrows are the factors of the principal component. And this doesn't mean that, the whatever 18 bodies that we measure have the arm in this position. That's just an abstract representation of the amount of variance. As you can see, the arm has the greatest variance. And on the basis of the first principal component, it was immediately clear that the program could differentiate the nymphs on the left from all other bodies on the right. So were 11 angles enough to do the work? At least in this case, yes. And so, and mind you, the first principal component has nothing to do with the researcher. It's an objective property of the data. It has nothing to do with what you want to do. It's just there. I mean, it's there. You have to bring it up, but it has nothing to do with your agenda, so to speak. Two things became conceivable. First, can the algorithm work at a scale larger than the panel? Second, can the algorithm not just recognize Pathosformel, but can it also tell us something about them? Because in this case, it had worked as a fingerprint. Okay, you fingerprinted all the nymphs on the left, but a fingerprint, it's useful, but it's useful to identify. It's not useful to know. It tells you nothing about the person that's been identified. Could the skeleton vectors do more? First question. First, we moved above the scale of the panel. This was work that had to be done by hand. It was complicated, so we only worked with 1/3 of the panels, 21, and about 1,700 bodies from the images, and then used K-means clustering algorithm to organize. And K-means you have to specify how many clusters you want. This, of course, is a limit. It's a process of trial and error. The two main errors are you want too few clusters, and even bodies that are very dissimilar end up together, which is a mistake. Too many clusters, and even bodies that are similar end up being separated, also a mistake. You just keep moving back and forth, and 16 seemed to be a reasonable compromise. Skeleton vectors have 11 angles, so the algorithm works in 11 dimensions. You can compress those 11 dimensions to 2. You lose a lot of information, but you preserve also a lot. Whoops. And no. And this is what you find, you know, a two-dimensional reduction shows that the 16 clusters are reasonably well demarcated from each other. 16 is a number where clusters are well demarcated, and so 16 it was. Now, again, the algorithm works, creates a cluster by putting in that clusters all the skeletons that are closer to the central skeleton than to the center of another cluster. So, in some cases, this blue and yellow dot are next to each other, but the idea is that the blue dot is closer to the center of the blue cluster and the yellow dot. And remember, you should try to imagine that. I never have been able to in 11 dimensions, whatever that means. Anyway, this is how this works. So the central skeleton is important, and here are the 16 central skeletons, but each cluster is, of course, more complicated than that because it has an agglomerative algorithm that hierarchizes the skeletons. And what we have inside each cluster is a string. This has about 80 of these dancing skeletons. Here is a tree of distances. These two are the closest, then comes this, etc., etc. And then here are the images from which they're drawn, and then there are other metadata below the author when it's known, the data when it's known, the number of the panel. Okay. Incidentally, the relationship, see, form and formula. In a sense, this, you could say, is the formula, and these are the forms. These are the basic structure. These skeletons here are a little snippet of the full cluster one, which is the one on the top left. And you know, it's not identical, but this is just a visual parallel to that conceptual opposition of form and form. Okay. This is what the algorithm had done. Had it captured Pathosformel? We looked at this, and at this point, you just have to go back to interpretation. Looked at this figure. What seemed like agitated clusters here seemed to be these 7. Then we started looking at the images. It quickly became clear that they fell in different groups. 3 clusters seemed agitated enough, but in fact, their figures were perfectly at rest, kneeling, sitting, lying down, and so on. This was a cautionary tale. Remember, the first step we took, we boxed bodies out. Well, when the body was had a relationship with the contents that was very strong, that inevitably created a misperception. We threw them away. Then there was another cluster that seemed really hyper-agitated. You look, it was a very small cluster, you look at the images, it turns out these are mostly astrological maps. So stars, or days, maybe. So again, in this case, there was a lot of agitation, but not pathos. And this was a more interesting cautionary tale because, remember, the whole idea of the Pathosformel is that inner states are expressed by outward movement. And that a strong inner state requires a strong outward movement, but the correlation is not linear. The strongest pathos doesn't require the strongest outward movement. This has indeed a maximum of physical turbulence, but it has nothing to do with inner turbulence. And then finally, we have the genuine Pathosformel. This was one cluster in which, among others, there is one version of the giant Orpheus, and in this other, there are various martyrdoms, and of course Atlas, and this then was the central, the cluster with most of Warburg's Pathosformel, the headhunters, as he calls it, the nymph, Fortuna being caught by Kairos, Botticelli's nymph Laocoon, and the death of Pentheus. Now, the algorithm had, heading towards my conclusion, 5 minutes to be done, the algorithm had indeed worked above the scale of a single panel. and have managed to identify the Pathosformel and separate them from other images of the human body. And so this means that potentially this project can be enlarged well beyond the size of Mnemosyne. And Mnemosyne already seemed very large, but actually can be done on a much larger scale. There was something rather strange and a little disturbing about this, because we were hoping that the algorithm would separate Pathosformel from other images, and this had happened. We were also hoping that it would separate Pathosformel from each other, and this quite clearly had not happened. The Pathosformel, I'm skipping a little bit here, but these are the Pathosformel rich clusters are all together up there. And why? Warburg usually speaks of Pathosformel plural, implicitly assuming that there will be a difference between Fortuna and the Dinah Fairs, between the nymph and Laura. There should be a difference. There is an early page in his notebooks, Schematismus der Pathosformel, and it's basically like a spreadsheet, and he has various rows with various possible forms of pathos. Then the page, at least from the reproduction we've seen, seems to have remained blank. But the idea was, again, to divide them. To each pathos' schema, this is sentence reflecting on the concept. Instead, Pathosformel had all been grouped together. Why? What do the nymph and Laocoon and Atlas and the Dinah Fairs have in common? What did the algorithm see that they had in common? Because obviously, if that happens, it means that the algorithm has found a common ground. What was it? At this point, you keep looking, of course, at both at the skeletons and at the images, and the common ground seemed to be this, that these images tend to always be involving both legs and arms. Involving them both, but involving them in sort of movements that are not exactly seen. Atlas support the globe and try not to slip. You try to hold the sail, as in the case of Fortuna, and to balance yourself on the waves. Keep snakes from suffocating you and running away, etc. So it was this double movement of arms and legs that sort of brought Pathosformel together. And there's a page in Meaning and Visualize in which Panofsky compared this double movement to the concept of the contrapposto, or counterpoise, which is important in much of Western sculpture. It's an interesting intuition, but really more for the difference, because, see, in the contrapposto, whether in repose or in movement, the point is that arms and legs are joined in a single fluid movement. These are incredibly, especially this one, unified forms. Pathos breaks the unity of it. That's its signature. Arms and legs, they're both involved, but they're committed to different actions. You try to keep snakes away and to run away. You try to keep a globe and not to slip. They're both very intense, but it's like a body fighting on two fronts. It's like a dissonance inserted within the unity of the body. So we took these images when we are at the Polytechnic. We went to a professor who teaches biomechanics and said, well, what can you tell us about what does this mean in terms of biomechanics? They said, well, these are poses that one cannot hold for long, which is even stopping in mid-step is kind of difficult. So more interesting suggestion came from a student at Stanford who said, well, you should look at a program called Lifeforms, which was created by a programmer and Merce Cunningham, the choreographer. And we did, and indeed, Lifeforms expands what we think we can do with the body. This is Cunningham. In the computer, the body is represented by joints. In Lifeforms, it's uncannily similar to what we have done. And this reduction allows to create something that is not natural in dance. Not natural, I think that that's the key. The superlative of emotion is not expressed by a superlative of physical movement, the somersaults of those astrological maps. It is expressed by this calling into question the natural unity of the body. Pathos expresses itself in breaking what we normally try to do, i.e. involving the entire body in the same thing. Passiones as agitations, this is Auerbach in an essay on passions, as motion which is aimless and undirected. So the sign of pathos is that the body is no longer. We're confident about these results. I think on the morphology, when it comes to the interpretation, it's different and much more tentative. And here, I think the best starting point is still Catoni's Desperate Woman in Motion. The contradictory movements of her arms on one side and her legs, body, and head on the other generate an oxymoron of sorts, she says. Her body has the narrative meaning of an affirmative verb, running to help, while the violent backward thrust of the arms declares its impossibility, thereby negating. Negating with the arms what is affirmed with the rest of the body. Oxymoron is really the right word for this body in enigmatic contradiction with itself. The Desperate Woman is a pathosformel of superlative kind, writes Catoni, and there's no doubt that she is, but I think one could go farther. It's not a pathosformel. This is the limit case for all pathosformel. And like most limit cases, it has an epistemological clarity that other cases lack. All pathosformel present us with disjointed bodies. This figure here represents, so to speak, the abstract sign of disjunction. Enigmatic precisely because it's so abstract, so incomprehensible. What is she doing? She's doing nothing. She's just expressing this contradiction of the body with itself. The image is not part of Warburg's corpus, but there is one minute which resembles her in one aspect. It has one arm bent backwards, and see what an incredible outlier just this detail makes. We're often asked about the relationship between close and distant reading, qualitative and quantitative, individual cases and large aggregates. Catoni's work alone are radical instances of the opposite approaches. Catoni's is really a very incredibly well done philological reconstruction that threads together one image after the other. All the images needed the previous image in order to come into being. Ours, an abstract pattern that sort of sucks in all sorts of different images that have no relationship with each other except for some geometrical properties. So it couldn't be more different. But if one sort of brackets for a second the fact that the genesis is so completely different, and one just looks at what this image shows, then a relationship emerges. The Desperate Woman, taking the manner to be a proxy for it, the Desperate Woman indicates the direction, the oxymoron, towards our three pathosformel rich clusters seem to be moving. Our little army of skeletons seem to be going in the direction. The fact that there is a little army of skeletons shows that the Desperate Woman is not an aberration. It's not an individual following, but it is really the logical unfolding of the inner state, of the inner logic of the pathosformel. So the approaches remain very different. They illuminate each other.